Well, thank you all for being here. I know it's a packed house, but there are just a few spots up front if anyone wants to move. Today's session is all about Concentra and our experience with much of the functionality that was introduced in version 15.1, specifically around note forms. Some of you guys might remember us from last year. We had the opportunity to present with Allscripts and really introduce this functionality for the first time. But today we wanted to do a deeper dive, kind of show you guys the configuration steps involved to implement some of these new features into your practice, as well as share with you kind of our lessons learned through using these features. But for those of you who don't know us, presenting today is my good friend here, Jeff Lyon, who has a striking resemblance to George Lucas. Jeff has 30 years of experience in healthcare. Just a fun fact, he builds custom, beautiful wooden furniture. Myself, on the other hand, was found outside the conference halls today. They gave me a t-shirt, asked me to be up here, and told me it was free beer after, so here I am. You're welcome. If you guys like any of the functionality that you see, anything, I encourage you to add us on Client Connect. We have a few enhancement ideas that we're going to talk about, so if we can get some votes there, or just kind of connect and share experiences, troubleshooting, strategies, just different things like that, that'd be great. If we still have jobs after that last slide, we are Concentra. We're a division of Select Medical, so we're a national healthcare provider focused on improving America's the health of America's workforce one patient at a time. We have 300 medical centers operating in 40 different states, and we specialize in occupational medicine, excuse me, but we also offer urgent care and physical therapy services at the majority of our centers. In addition to that, we offer health and wellness services and even provide on-site care to over 120 client companies. But what we're really here to talk about today is our relationship with Allscripts. So we are a member of the Allscripts Customer Reference Program, and together we formalized the development partnership arrangement, which really culminated in a lot of the enhancements that you see in 15.1. So we had the unique opportunity to work with Allscripts and really bring enhancement ideas to them and work through the development of those enhancements, and then bring that to what is generally available in 15.1. So a lot of the features that we're going to talk about, we've actually had in several releases in a custom code base over 2 years or a little over. So again, we're going to share with you kind of our lessons learned using some of those features as well as the configuration. So if that sounds good, I'd like to start off with our first enhancement, which is required vitals. So the problem we were kind of trying to solve was for many of our state regulatory forms and exams, as well as just a best clinical practice, vital signs are mandatory. And we didn't have a mechanism to make those required until 15.1. So you can see here, I'll take you into the configuration actually. In the orderable item dictionary, you can select a system delivered vitals panel, or you can create a custom vitals panel. And under the OID selector, you can see now, yep, thank you. You can see now there's a new column called required components, so you can literally flag which vital measures you want to be required in that particular vitals panel. So how that looks on the front end is you'll see a required yellow now accompanies that cell that you have marked as required for that vitals panel. Additionally, if we look at that a little closely, you can see here that the field actually will remain in that yellow requirements until documentation is entered. Also, the OK button remains disabled until all the required fields are satisfied. And then we have the ability to embed vitals panels within note templates. So if you embed a vitals panel within a note template that has required components, you'll see in the table of contents over here that the vitals section now appears in pale yellow, and that just signifies that there are required components in that section, and that will remain like that until all those fields are satisfied. Some of the lessons learned here are, this is a hard stop, so please carefully consider which vital signs you make mandatory. Like I said, the OK button is disabled until all those fields are entered. Also, when embedding a vitals panel with required components, the note cannot be signed and finalized until all those requirements are met. So, be carefully consider that as well. The next functionality that we want to talk to you about is required fields and note forms. So many of our payers require that specific information is documented as part of the clinical note, and that's especially true for state workers' compensation forms and other regulated state and federal forms. Historically, there was no mechanism to make a field on a note form required, and that all changed with the new functionality we introduced in 15.1. So again, I want to share with you kind of the new configuration steps of that. In the note admin, under the properties of a single item, you'll see now a new flag called required field. So you can make that, and that's what makes it show up with the pale yellow that we've displayed in the note authoring workspace. Additionally, you can select a required group name, so you can group several fields together where one selection would satisfy the requirement for that group. And I'll show you an example of that in just a bit. So that's the configuration, but how does it look in the note authoring workspace? You can see here now, because we have a note form with required fields in it, the form name in the table of contents shows up with a pale yellow, signifying that there are required components in that note form. Additionally, the individual fields that we've marked as required show up in that pale yellow. And those will remain so until documentation is entered for them, as well as you can see up here, the note form is no longer pale yellow once all the fields on that note form are satisfied. This was the groups that I was talking about. So you can see in the screenshot up top, we ask a question, is this therapy referral for a post-surgical condition? And then just below, the user selects no, satisfying the group and making these two fields no longer required. So that's pretty neat functionality there. Required fields does have an impact to copy forward as well. So you can see red triangles will appear next to a selection or a note form entry that is copied forward that is required. And that just clicking on that red triangle allows the user to validate that, make sure that they want that rendered in the current note, and that will satisfy the requirement. Additionally, if they didn't want that information in, but they copied the form forward, they could just select another entry, and if it's in the same required group, it would just change the requirement for that, and it would satisfy it, and it would render whatever your new documentation is. Obviously, in this instance, it's a radio group, would be mutually exclusive, so it would unselect that. This is configurable, so under Note Admin, under the Note Form Properties, you have a new setting called Copy Forward, and so there's a couple things here you can set. You can not allow copy forward at all, so the form could not be copied forward, or you could allow copy forward verification required, which would allow the user to copy the note form forward, and that's what presents the user with the red validation triangles. But you could also select allowed no verification required, which would allow you to copy that note form forward even though it was a required field, but it wouldn't require the user to click on the red validation triangle, and so it actually would not present to the user. It would just copy that, copy forward that information into the note form. There is a warning message that comes along with this. So if a user tries to finalize the note without satisfying all the required fields, there's a new pop-up warning, required note form items, and it just states that note forms with required items have not been completed to sign the note final. Clicking OK would navigate you to the first note form in the table of contents with unsatisfied required fields. So it automatically takes you to there where you have unsatisfied required fields. Cancel would just return you to the note authoring workspace. It would cancel the signing and finalizing process and just return you to the NAW. So this is a hard stop. Some of the lessons learned here, the note cannot be signed and finalized without satisfying all the required fields, so be judicious in the use of those. If a note form with required fields is added, if you use the add note form functionality from the table of contents, it cannot be deleted. So be careful when using those as well. Something to think about, required fields cannot exist in a subform. And then also just one of the desired enhancements I was telling you about was conditional logic. So I showed you the question about, is this therapy referral for a post-surgical condition, and the user had selected no. Well, if they had selected yes, the other two fields would have been satisfied as well. What we'd like, or what we're hoping for as an enhancement in the future, would be some conditional logic that would say if the user selected yes, then still require surgical date and the other information. I'm going to turn things over to Jeff here, and he's going to tell you about a few more enhancements.
And just to let you know, I just talked to Dr. Armstrong, and that enhancement request that he just spoke to, the conditional required fields, actually is going to get delivered in 17.1 in that first iteration. So we just found that out, so that's been taken care of. The next functionality we're going to talk about is ordering from note. In our experience, the clinicians were really frustrated by the number of times that they were having to go to the ACI to order things that they order a lot, right? And so we had worked with Allscripts to come up with this functionality to be able to order directly from a note form. So again, we're going to kind of look at the back end and how this can be set up. So Allscripts created a new section in the TOC called recommended orders. And they created a new form that's called recommended orders. And within that form, so what we're looking at here is that new form that's called recommended orders. I have two options. I can create a header, and then I have the ability to look up and add orders to this form. So I can add this order field to the form, and then do a lookup, and in this case I was looking for ACE wrap, and drop ACE wrap down and say okay, and I could add ACE wrap to this form, right? So now kind of how we chose to use that functionality. One of the first areas that we did it, we actually renamed the section in the TOC. So in this example, it's actually called in-house orders as opposed to recommended orders. And you guys know you can rename or create new sections, but we renamed that order, that section, to in-house orders. We wanted to come up with a kind of a order form of the real common orders that our clinicians used. So we added some of the POC labs, the point of care labs, stuff that we're doing in-house. Some of the common procedures like pre and post peak flows, pulse ox, EKGs, those kinds of things, as well as kind of a subset of radiology orders that we performed commonly in the clinic. So if you select an order from this form, it works just like if I was in the ACI. So if there are asked order entry questions, you're going to be presented with that. If there are details about that order that need to be populated, it's going to pop up the order detail box and allow you to answer those questions. You do have the ability on the right to add the problem that these orders would be linked to, and if that's the only requirement for that order, when you place it, you could literally add your problem here that you're going to link your order to, and then you could just go check, 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 and the orders get placed. Another area where we used this was we created a supply form. So in our occupational medicine side of the house, we provide a lot of supplies because we see a lot of musculoskeletal injuries. So we did a lot of supplies. And so we built a supply form so that the clinicians, again, could quickly go in and order the supplies. Excuse me. Now, one of the things you notice here is we have this ×2 ×3 thing. Right now, we don't have the ability to link the number of billable items, right? So if I say that I want the patient to receive 2 immobilizers, and so I'm going to pick the ×2, it doesn't set the billable units to 2, unfortunately, today. But what it did do is it created a task. Excuse me. It creates a task that goes to the MA, and the title of that task is immobilizer ×2. So there was some frustration sometimes with the clinicians that they were trying to figure out a way to, so it creates an order task that goes to the back office staff, just like any order will, right? And so in that task, we name that task knee immobilizer ×2 or ACE wrap 2-inch ×3, so that the MA would know how many of those supplies the clinician wanted them to get. So there's good things and bad things about this, and there's some things that we hope we can get some more enhancements around. One of the things is that you're limited to what kind of orders you can add to that form. So currently you can't add medication, med admin, prescription immunization orders, right? So if you're going to go order a prescription or a medication administration, you've got to go to the ACI. Secondly, they created this new section called recommended orders and this new form. And on that form, as I shared with you on the kind of configuration part, the only thing you can add on that form are orders and a header. And there's been times when it would have been really nice because we wanted to ask 2 questions. I wanted to just put a text box on there or stick like a medicine field where I could ask a checkbox or something. And that functionality doesn't exist on that particular form. So you end up having to come up with a second form in that section, just to ask that one question. So there's these limited functionality on the recommended orders form. So kind of our enhancement, our desires are, one, that the other thing that you can't do is add orders to any form you want. You can only add orders to that one form, recommended orders form, in that one section, recommended orders, right? So one of our desires is the ability to add orders to any form, okay? And also, we would love to be able to order any kind of order from any kind of form. And let me give you kind of an example of where we really wish we had this functionality. We created a note for our bloodborne pathogen protocol. So we have a bloodborne pathogen exposure, and we've got an entire note that's the whole protocol. So on visit 1, you do this. On visit 2, you ask these things, you do this. On visit 3. And part of the protocols, it'll say, administer this med, or prescribe this med, or prescribe this vaccination, right? And so they're going down through this note, but then they have to jump out of the note and go to the ACI and order that thing that they were just reminded to order, and then go, so it's this back and forth. And so if we could embed those orders directly in that note, that clinician could go right down through that note, never leave the note, get everything ordered, everything that he wants administered, boom, 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 labs ordered, and the whole 9 yards, and he's done. So that's the kind of enhancement that we're looking for. Hopefully that we can get that delivered at some point. The next functionality I'm going to speak to is charge from note. This has really been a big one for us. There was a lot of, it seemed to us to be a very inefficient workflow to require clinicians to go to the ACI and order something for the sole purpose of capturing a charge, right? So they would go and document that they did this laceration repair in the procedure form, but then they were forced to go order a laceration repair in the ACI because that's how they could capture the charge. Or they're forced to remember when they get to the encounter form that they did this thing, and I've got to go capture that charge. The other real downside of that is when you're searching for that charge in the encounter form, you're searching by the description of the charge code, not by the prescription of the thing that you did. And as you guys know, at least in our experience, charge codes tend to be very cryptic. So people would pick the wrong procedures a lot, right? So we're going to give you some examples of how we remedied a lot of that with this new functionality. This was probably one of the biggest areas where we got a win out of this, and this is an example of these procedure charges, right? So this is the procedure form, and this is I'm going to show you actually how it looks on the front end, but in the back end, how you kind of configure. So this is our procedure form for a laceration wound repair. And what I was able to do here is add all of these as text fields to the form, give them very specific labels, and then link that field to a specific charge code. So there's this new functionality now, new attribute to these fields that's called charge link. And you have a couple options. You can say none if there's no charge associated with that field. You can say master search, which literally what it does, so if you wanted to just stick a checkbox on a form that said charges, and they clicked that, it would open up the charge module just like if you were searching for it in the encounter form. And then you would be forced again to search for. Or you can actually link it to a very specific charge code, which I did here. I linked it to this to the CPT code 12001, right? One of the other things that you can do with this functionality that's I hope someday we can do through the OID dictionary is I can associate a charge code and a modifier to that field on that form, right? So in this particular case, I was able to come in and create this field and link it to this charge code and also link it to this unique modifier, right? So in this particular form, and I'll kind of show you on the front end again, every one of these fields actually uses the exact same charge code. What's unique about it is that modifier. So this was one of the first areas that we actually applied this functionality. We chose not to use the EM coder. And so we needed to make sure that at the end of a visit that we had captured an appropriate visit code or E&M code. So we're kind of combining multiple functions here. First of all, we created a form and we made it a required group, right? So they have to pick something on this form to be able to sign and finalize their note. And then we added every field that was appropriate for a new patient visit. These are some unique kind of Texas codes. But and you'll notice this new kind of sign, which is the $sign. So that lets clinicians know that on this field, it's going to create a $sign. It's going to create a charge, right? So now we know that by the clinician cannot get past sign and finalize their note until they capture an E&M charge. Another thing that, much like I spoke to with orders, if you order from a note, you get the same functionality. Well, if you set up charge from note, and there are attributes for that charge code, that works in charge from note as well. So in this particular case, this therapeutic exercises is set, the charge code associated with therapeutic exercises is set to be multiple units. So we need to know how many billable units are associated with that charge code. So if it is selected on the form, then the charge entry details box is presents and it allows you to document the appropriate number of units. This is where we really have gotten appreciation from our clinicians. Again, kind of going back to that, the procedure stuff, right? So this is the actual form that's presented to the clinician on the front end. When they go down, so in the TOC, they've selected this laceration wound repair. So at the top of the note, before they even get down to the documentation part of that procedure, they're presented with all the options to capture the charge. So if it's appropriate to bill for a surgical tray or a laceration tray, they just check the box and they've captured the charge. But then I was able to be very specific in the details of what they're capturing, right? This is a simple repair, and it's for this body part or body parts, and then it's for the 2.5 centimeter or less or whatever. So it's really, really easy for the clinician to know exactly which charge code to capture. And this was the example that I showed you on the back end where I had to be able to put all of these options on a form, and they were all linked to the same charge code, and what was unique about each of these options was that internal modifier. So really the lesson learned here was just that we did get see a significant reduction in missed charges or in charges that were specifically around those procedure forms, right? In the serum removal form, we've got the charge for serum removal, and we've got the charge for the irrigation, right? In the eye one, we can do the eye tray or the Morgan's lens, or if you're documenting a nebulizer treatment, you can capture the charge for the supply. So it really helps in making sure that those charges don't get missed. The next one was, we rolled this application out over a 2-year period to these 300 centers. And so we had a significant learning curve for a long period of time, right? And what we would find is that with kind of the standard setup for when you order something and a charge gets dropped, if it goes into hold status, the charge doesn't drop until somebody's managed that hold status, right? So if you order a lab and it goes into a hold for specimen collection, until it was documented that it was collected, the charge doesn't drop, right? Well, our staff is really good about doing the work, but they weren't always really good about managing all those tasks. So we would have charges drop to result charges, to med admin charges. It just became a real mess. So we approached Allscripts about this concept of charging immediately. All right? So now when you go to set up in your orderable item dictionary and you're going to link a charge to that orderable item, you have this new option called immediately. Okay? And it drops the charge at the time the order is placed. Right? Doesn't matter if it's in a hold status of any kind. So when today, when they order labs, we capture the charge. They may or may not ever document, and unfortunately still don't at times document the collection correctly, but we captured the charge. If for some reason that procedure doesn't get performed and that order gets canceled or changed to an enter an error status, it will remove that charge from the encounter form or charge summary as long as they haven't been submitted yet. This is just another thing that really helped us to alleviate some of these charge problems that we were seeing and mischarges. One of the enhancements around this, and kind of this is one of those unintended consequences of this functionality, is that if you order, for instance, where we see this most commonly, somebody orders labs to be done at a future date, right? So you order the labs to be done at a future date, and boom, 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 all the charges drop in that encounter, right? So the clinicians need to remove those charges before they hit the submit button. So we have an enhancement request with Allscripts to look at not only that order, but also look at the to be done date, to take that into account in the determination of whether I should drop charges immediately or go ahead and hold on to them. The next big win that we got out of this that was driven by both our medical side of the house as well as our therapy side of the house was this desire not to have to go to the encounter form to do all their charge work, right? Because generally the clinician has signed and finalized their note at that point, and now they get to the encounter form and they recognize that something is not there. Right? So then they have to go back, edit the note, create an addendum. If they appropriately want to make sure the documentation supports whatever charge, they might just stick in there in the encounter form. Right? So there's this new option now called charge summary. It exists in the NAW. And so you see here at the bottom of every note, it's called charge summary. And I am in my note, doing my documentation, I'm at the end, I think I'm in good shape, I can click charge summary while I'm still in the NAW, and I'm presented with the exact same functionality that you can do in the encounter form. Okay? So from here I cannot add diagnoses. So if I recognize that a diagnosis got missed, I need to get out. But I can set my primary if that's not set correctly. I can remove or add charges directly here. I can make sure that the charges are linked to the appropriate diagnoses. I can adjust the billable units if they're not appropriate, right? If they ran to 1 and I need it to be 3 or 4. And right from here, then I can say I want to submit and sign and finalize my note. So I've done my work, I'm in charge summary, I can submit and sign and finalize. But if I recognize that something is missing here, then I can just save and close, and I'm still in the note. I haven't signed and finalized the note. I can go up and do what appropriate documentation I need to do, and then come back to my charge summary. There's a couple preferences around this that need to be set. You need to enable note charge summary so that option of charge summary appears. And then you need to be able to enable this note charge summary submit to interface, so where it tells the system, I can submit charges from charge summary and I don't need to be taken to the encounter form at all. So this, for us, has completely replaced the use of the encounter form for our clinicians. They do everything that they need to do in charge summary, and they're taken right back to their daily schedule, and away they go to their next patient. Has certainly resulted in fewer notes having to be amended so that they could go back and enter or document something that they forgot to document. And again, we've seen this reduction in mischarges. So I'm going to turn this back over to Ron now. He's going to talk about this next function now, that note output progress check.
All right, so the note output progress check, really what we're trying to solve for is we're having clinicians forget certain areas of the note, especially as Jeff mentioned when we were implementing this over 2 years at 300 different centers. So this kind of led to incomplete documentation, coding and claims denials. We wanted to provide clinicians a very user-friendly way to just review pertinent sections of the note, such as the review of systems and physical exam, just to know that they have entered documentation for those sections of the note. So that led us to this note output progress check enhancement. In the configuration, now you would go into your note admin and click on the note template, and you would right-click on the specific output document that you wanted to edit, and there's new fields now on that by every section that says participate in progress check. So you would literally just go down the line and go ahead and select what sections of the note that you wanted to participate in the progress check. You can do that individually for each output document. Additionally, there's another preference setting as when you present that progress check warning to the user. So you have a few options. Never, obviously, if you didn't want to use it. On closing, on signing. We found that it worked best in our organization on finalization. So just before finalization, we would present that warning to the user. What that looks like on the front end in the note authoring workspace. So a user goes to finalize their note, and a section that is marked to participate in the progress check fails that check. You would get presented with this warning that just states the following outputs have failed the progress check. And OK would take you to the note output progress check view. Cancel would just cancel that action and will allow you to continue to sign and finalize your note. So unlike required fields, this is not a hard stop. This is just a warning to the user. I can show you what that window looks like. So if you did hit OK, you would get presented with the note output progress check viewer. You can see here you have the different sections of the note, as well as whether content is present. So if it fails, it would have a red unhappy face. If it passed the check, it would be a green smiley face. The warning would never be presented to you if all the sections had been filled out in the first place. So you'll only see this warning or that warning pop-up message if one of the areas failed the progress check. Additionally, if you have sections in the note that you chose not to participate, they would just say NA there. In the viewer or in the view window, there is a new tab now called progress check. So the user, when they're reviewing their output document, can click on that manually and just review this again at any time. So again, what we've learned, this is not a hard stop, and even though we present it to clinicians, we found many users will just click cancel past it. Another challenge is that it doesn't satisfy documentation for coding requirements. It only indicates if documentation is present in that section. So you could literally type in a period in a free text box in that section, and it's only checking for content. So really, it's best used to just indicate that sections may have been overlooked, like we stated, especially for new users. The review systems we saw were frequently being missed. So for things like that, it's helped out. That's the last functionality that we had to talk to you about. So if you have any questions, we can open it up here.